So the first thing which we should know about is, I take your pardon, I need to go back to past chapter. This is the beginning of the topic. That is when we got independence. We know this very well that Indian economy had been suffering from multiple troubles and multiple challenges. All these challenges and troubles were all associated with society, economy, and politics. Here, we are not going to discuss about the challenges related to society and politics, but definitely we'll talk about the economy. So, just after the independence, the next very decision what the government of India had to take is that what sort of economy should India be? Worldwide, there were three types of economies prevalent and were being popularly adopted. The first of them is, as you can see over here on your screen, as per my cursor, you can note capitalist economy. Capitalist economy, as you must have read in the junior classes, 9th and 10th, you have been introduced with, is a kind of economy where all the economic decisions, like how to determine the price, what should be the quantity of production, and what good should be produced, are decided by the market forces of demand and supply. Nothing is done by the government. In short, I can say that there is no intervention of the government. And children, the best example of capitalist economy can be the US economy, because US was the country, the first country to adopt capitalist economy and had proven that this is the sort of economy which can bring success to the economy. The second type of very popular and prevalent economy was socialist economy, and it still is. As it sounds, socialist, which thinks of the society. Society, which is a combination of the people and the government. Therefore, in this type of economy, the economy was taking all the decisions, or still taking all the decisions, with the intervention of the government. Each and every decision related to market, whether how to produce, what to produce, and for whom to produce, which you studied in microeconomics in class 11, are taken by the intervention of the government. And the best example for it can be Russia. Although when socialist economy was adopted, that was not Russia, it was USSR, which was further split. But let me tell you, when it was USSR in the form of a socialist economy, it was not a weak economy at all. It was one of the most developed economies in the world, which was making wonders. So when it came to India, that which economy we should be adopting, whether the capitalist economy or socialist economy, it was definitely a challenge. But ultimately, the then Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and many more authorities decided to be a mixed economy. As you can see the text in red color, mixed economy. Now, what is this mixed economy? I would go in brief only. Mixed economy is a kind of economy where the economic decisions of what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce are, of course, decided by the market forces of demand and supply, but certain intervention of the government. That means it is not let free completely. When and wherever required to intervene, the government definitely does. So India adopted for mixed economy. Now there is a question asked. Why India adopted for mixed economy? Why not the capitalist economy when we were so backward? And the government also was not that powerful and empowered. And why could we not adopt socialist economy, as Russia was one of the best friends of India and we were very much inspired by Russian economy? Then why not? So there were certain reasons. The first thing is the population of India was huge. In such huge population, it was never good to go either ways, either ruling it completely by the government or completely letting it free was not that easy. Moreover, the population of India was not that well educated. They were, of course, big. They were not that literate. They were not that rational as well. Secondly, we had to think of being a socialist economy, as our then Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru wanted to be a socialist economy, but it was not easy to convert the ownership of property from private to socialist. You know this very well, that property, that is kind of lands, factories, industries, maybe the houses, were all owned by the individuals. So it was not easy for the people to convince, or the subject to be convinced about converting the private properties into the ownership of the government, as India was already suffering from multiple political and social issues. Next is, India was, of course, a poor country. When we're talking about the Indian economy, that time it was a stagnant economy, which we covered yesterday in the topic. If it was a stagnant economy with very poor GDP, then the subject of India or the people of India were also poor enough to survive. So there was a dire need of the Indian government to intervene into everything. So it was never in the favor of the government to go ahead with the capitalist economy, because it was always a requirement, a need of the time for the government to intervene for the welfare of the people and to take care of the people. And of course, the Constitution of India says that it is for the people, by the people, and of the people. So for us, as per the Constitution, who is the most important? That is the subject. Subject means the people of India. Therefore, ultimately, we decided that will be the mixed economy. We'll go ahead with the system where we overcome the weaknesses of both capitalist as well as socialist economy. Children, there is a 1 mark from this portion of your NCERT, that is structural composition. You can see the last line in blue color, which is talking about the contribution made by each of these sectors. These sectors, that is the primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors, is known as structural composition of the economy. Sometimes it can be the 1 marker asking what is a structural composition. Proceeding to the next topic. Once we had decided that what kind of economy we want to be, the things were not over. We still had long way to go to meet out the challenges we were suffering from and to cover up the challenges related to poverty, unemployment, and many more things. So the government of India, as I mentioned, was very much inspired by the socialist economy of Russia. Russia was the economy which had already adopted the 5-year plans, this comprehensive scheme of planning which could guide the government and the economy how to run and how to utilize the resources for the betterment of the people and growth of the economy. Thus, you just the blue colored first line, it is written very clearly. Thus, in the year 1950, look at the cursor, in the year 1950, the Planning Commission was set up. I repeat, in the year 1950, the Planning Commission was set up. This Planning Commission was chaired by the Prime Minister. I repeat, this Planning Commission was chaired by the Prime Minister. Now, a bonus information for you children. Let me tell you, this Planning Commission is no more continued. The last 5-year plan we had was the 12th 5-year plan, which ended up after the office of the NDA government in the year 2014, and it was replaced by Niti Aayog. I repeat, it was replaced by Niti Aayog. It has been mentioned in multiple of the reference books. So maybe a part of your question paper. I repeat, Planning Commission did not continue after 12th plan. It was replaced by Niti Aayog. So the last 5-year plan we started up with was in the year 2012. Now, coming back to the topic, the 5-year plan was started in the year 1950, and the first 5-year plan was started up or implemented in the year 1951. Unfortunately, the first 5-year plan could not be a success because of lack of planning and lack of implementations. Therefore, The then ministry hired a well-renowned statistician and economist, P.C. Mahalanobis. Please note it. I repeat, I just put my cursor. That is P.C. Mahalanobis. P.C. Mahalanobis is also known as the architect of Indian planning. I repeat, he is also known as architect of Indian planning. It's a one marker. In fact, both the information I shared with you right now are the one markers. They are very important one markers, so please have a note of it. P.C. Mahalanobis is known as an architect of Indian plan. But why? What did he do, or what was his contribution? As soon as he joined the Planning Commission as an architect, he contributed into two important fields, which is he established Indian Statistical Institute. I repeat, he established the Indian Statistical Institute, which is commonly known as ISI. Its work was to issue the journal related to the stats of India, which comprises of the challenges and the suggestions towards it. So the journal which they issued was known as Sankhya. Look at the cursor. This is again a one marker, which is Sankhya. So P.C. Mahalanobis had contributed towards ISI establishment, and the journal established or published in the name of Sankhya. Now, as I just said, that there were 12 five-year plans. There must have been some reasons. There must have been some objectives. Important question, as you can see on your screen, at the top of your screen, it is written that what were the primary objectives of five-year plan. Children, apart from your syllabus, I would like to tell you that there are two kinds of objectives in the five-year plan, which are long-term and short-term. Short-term plans have never been discussed in NCERT, so we'll just discuss about the long-term or general objectives of five-year plan. So the general objectives of five-year plan, as per your NCERT textbook, is growth, equity, self-reliance, and modernization, as reflecting in the red color on your screen. I repeat, children, it is growth, equity, self-reliance, and modernization. What is growth? As I have mentioned so many times earlier, that the GDP growth rate of India was very low. It was all because of low productivity in all the three sectors, including employment. So the primary objective of the Indian government was to provide facilities to the economy so that we could increase the productivity in all the three sectors. Here, there is an instance in the textbook which I like to share here. This can be a reference to the question also. They have written in NCERT, they have written a text which is, growth is like a cake. Yes, that cake which we cut on our birthdays. So growth is like a cake. The bigger is the cake, the bigger will be the piece given to the individual. That's how the bigger is the growth, the bigger will be the per capita income of the individual living in the country. So growth tends to be very, very important and was taken as the primary objective of the five-year plan. Then comes this equity. Equity, as it sounds, it's all about the equality. As I mentioned in the last question and last topic, that is the first topic of this chapter, that India was suffering from multiple social issues. One of them was inequality and unequal distribution, or you may call social and economic disparities. So it was very important for the government to talk about and resolve about the social and economic disparities. So what they did is, they started working upon the rights, and they focused majorly on the equal economic rights. That means any person from India belonging to any caste, creed, and region can go for any employment opportunity, will not have any check on any kind of economic growth pursued by that particular individual. Then comes his self-reliance. See, India was completely dependent on the foreign powers or the rest of the world. What was the reason? We were not producing anything. You won't even believe that being an agrarian economy, even things like wheat, sugar, were also imported in India from the rest of the world. Other than this, being so much of independent over the raw materials like iron, steel, cotton, jute, we were still not self-dependent on the production of the goods related to these. So the next objective of Indian government was to become self-reliant. How could we be self-reliant? We could only be self-reliant by only avoiding the imports from the rest of the world and encouraging the production in our home country. And so did we. We allowed green revolution. We allowed import substitution. We also allowed industrial policy resolution kind of policies. Then comes this modernization. See, modernization is actually a wider concept. When it comes to Indian economy in 1950, India was struggling with multiple backwardness and mindsets related issues. Like education was domain for a few living in the society. Science and technology were not very much handy for everyone. In fact, mechanization or uses of machines were also not that popular in the industries of India. So when it is talked about modernization, it is absolutely two-dimensional. The first is about the uses of machines, technologies, and sciences in the production prospect. And the second, it is all about the development of the mindset of the people, thought process of the people, and giving equality to all stratas and groups of the society. So modernization, of course, became equally important. If you see and consider all these 4 points, you will feel that yes, they were very much rational and they were wisely thought and implemented about. And these 4 5-year plans objectives continue till the last 5-year plan, which is the 12th 5-year plan. I hope this topic is clear to you. There's so many questions asked out of this is 1 marker as mentioned over here. One more thing I would like to mention, the most common error committed. I repeat, children, the most common error committed. You have already gone through with your syllabus. So when it comes to IPR, the year which flashes on your mind must be 1958. Because IPR is something which is deeply associated with 1958. Therefore, when you're asked that when was IPR introduced in India, your answer is 1958, whereas it is a myth because IPR was for the first time introduced in India in the year 1948. As you can see, it is written over there that IPR or Industrial Policy Resolution 1948 and the directive principles of the Indian Constitution reflected the outlook of Planning Commission or planning only. So it simply means it's just in a line given in CBSE, therefore we don't even focus on, but this is somehow missed by us and we commit mistake over here. I hope you will not commit this mistake. And we proceed to the reforms. We know that India has been an agrarian economy and we still are, because more than 50% of India's population is still dependent on agriculture. And majority of our GDP contribution is also received from agricultural sector. So after becoming independence in the year 1950, we adopted some agricultural sector reforms. Children, it is a very important 4 and 6 mark question. Please read the question, which is, what types of agricultural reform policies were adopted in India after independence? There were multiple adopted. I just classify them into 3, which is land reforms, technical reforms, and the last is other reforms. When it is about the land reforms, these were the prior reform policies. Actually, they had already been introduced before 1950 as well. That means just after independence, we had started working on them. So the first comes is land ceiling. Just look at the cursor, land ceiling. Land ceiling can be an independent question as well. So don't wonder, it is a very simple thing as it sounds. Land ceiling means fixing the limit of ownership of the land. As I had mentioned in yesterday's session, there was a system of land settlement. Under land settlement, zamindars were the owner of maximum lands, which created disparity among the ownership of the landowners. See, some of the farmers had no piece of land, whereas some of the farmers had endless land to cultivate. So to start this problem, the government of India brought a law that a particular farmer cannot have more than a certain limit of land. This limit is not fixed. It was varying from state to state. Therefore, there is no mention about it. When this land ceiling system started, in some of the states, it became very successful, whereas it could not be successful in some of the states as the farmers were very smart and they found the legal ways out, like they started transferring the ownership of their lands on the name of their family members. Whereas this land ceiling system was a very innovative scheme and a very ambitious scheme of the government of India, could not be that successful. Then comes his land settlement system. Under land settlement system, this official announcement of zamindari or landlord system or Rao system was all removed. All were legally withdrawn so that nobody in a particular village could claim the big ownership of land or power on the lands. It was completely withdrawn with legal process and legal implementations. Then comes his removal of intermediaries. This is something very important. It's not all about the ownership of land. It's also about the selling of the products or selling of the agricultural produces. Indian farmer was in a very bad shape. They were poor, they were illiterate, they were not aware of the market, they were not aware of the prices, and the benefit or the interest was completely being served of the intermediaries. The intermediaries intervened. They went to the rural India or rural parts of India. They purchased the crops at a very cheap price and they sold it at a very high price in the urban markets. So the profit margin, you may say that lion's share, which was being earned was by only the intermediaries. In fact, the farmers were not getting benefit of it. So the government strictly removed the intervention of the intermediaries. As I have already mentioned, there was end of zamindari system. And the last comes is consolidation of land. When we know that the lands were small in sizes, they were of course scattered as well. They were scattered, they were small, which affected the productivity. So what government of India thought next was they wanted to consolidate the land sizes. Suppose a farmer has a land in direction east and the other land in direction west. So the farmer definitely will not go to west or will definitely avoid east. So what government did is, which is commonly known as Chakbandi system. It's a local language, children. I repeat, it is Chakbandi system. So what government of India started doing? Started providing the lands to the farmers in a particular area. Especially, they were the adjacent land pieces so that the farmer could take benefit of all the piece of land. So these were the multiple land reform. Now, children, if you're asked what were the land reforms, you just need to talk about all these 5 points. That's it. But if you talked about the agricultural reforms, mind it. If you talked about the agricultural reforms, then you need to talk about all the 3 points and the sub points. Whereas if you just talked about the land reforms, you just need to talk about these 5 points, which I have just discussed about. Then comes his technical reforms. That's Green Revolution. We have been studying about Green Revolution for long, so I'll go in brief. It was introduced in 1960s with the combined effort of the then Prime Minister, late Mrs. Indira Gandhi, and Dr. S. Swaminathan, an agrarian scientist. They both suggested scientific agriculture in India. Here, they encouraged the uses of HYB seeds, scientific methods, non-dependence of monsoon rain, that means artificial irrigation, and many more things. It was first introduced with the staple crops like wheat and rice only in the states of Punjab, Haryana, and Andhra Pradesh. I repeat, Punjab, Haryana, western parts of Uttar Pradesh, and Andhra Pradesh. Later on, it was attached to many other states. Then there have been some recent reforms, which are the other reforms, which is banking sector reforms and market reforms, which we'll cover in the topic rural development in detail. Now here, after adoption of Green Revolution and land reforms, Indian farmer became self-dependent and they had marketed surplus. Now look at this blue line, the last line. The portion of agriculture produce which is sold in the market by the farmers is called marketed surplus. Why has it been mentioned here? It's a one marker, it is generally asked on the name of marketed surplus. May it be a fill in the blanks or just the defined question. I repeat, the portion of agriculture produce which is sold in the market by the farmers is known as marketed surplus. Now, there's an interesting question. It is an open-ended question and very, very important question to be asked. You must have done some debates in your classroom when studying this topic. That is all about the subsidies. When we introduced Green Revolution became a harbinger for the needs of the agricultural funds. So the government of India was forced to provide subsidies to the farmers. Therefore, it has always been a question among the economists and the experts whether the subsidies should continue or not. So both the points, favor as well as against. And I would suggest you that you do write both the points, favor as well as in against. If it is a 4 or 6 mark question, if it is a 3 mark question, just go ahead with one of the options, but conclude it well so that the examiner is satisfied with the answer. So first I'll tell about the points in the favor. We know that India is full of the marginal farmers, that means the small farmers. They need the financial support. So if there is subsidy on the producers like fertilizers, HYB seeds, chemicals, pesticides, so the financial burden somehow is reduced on these marginal farmers. It removes disparity. You know, when there is, just imagine, if there is no subsidy, then the producers just I counted will be used by the large farmers, but will not be used by the marginal farmers. So to remove this disparity, it is very important that we provide subsidy so that small farmers can also afford it. It also encourages scientific output. When it comes to uses of subsidy, then definitely the farmer will be using all the inputs which are scientific, and the outcome or producers will be encouraged and it will be multiplied. So the uses of scientific methods are encouraged after the provision of subsidies. Now, a very, very important point, which is it helps to overcome the debt trap. You know what? Farmers are very, very poor. Still in majority of the area, the marginal farmers are suffering from the debt. They have to borrow money from local sources, from their friends, relatives, and all. So if these producers like fertilizers, chemicals, HYB seeds become cheaper for them, they definitely will not have to borrow the money from the local sources and they'll be free from the debt trap. So not directly, but yes, indirectly, it definitely helps for the debt trap. Then comes against. Why so many economists have time to time spoken against subsidies on agriculture? There are certain important points, which is first of them is burden on government budget. You know, when the government budget is declared, when the government makes revenue is spent on the various kind of revenue expenditures, which is subsidies. The government doesn't just provide the subsidy on agriculture, there are many more aspects where it is. But when it comes to reduction of burden on government budget, we need to rethink about the subsidies which have been being provided. Now, it helps the large farmers only. Now, the question comes how? How does it help only the large farmers? That's very much justifies again. As small farmers are still dependent, very much dependent on the natural resources, like they use manures, they use the insecticides which are homemade with the help of neem and turmeric and all. They still bullock, the pair of bullock for irrigation reason, they still wait for the monsoon. So where does the subsidy go? The subsidy is only being used by those farmers who are actually buying all these products. Then definitely the large farmers who actually don't need any kind of subsidy from the government are getting the benefit of it. And one of the drawback of providing subsidies to the farmer by the government of India is that the government provides subsidies to the fertilizer and chemical and pesticide industries. So these industries are actually getting the benefit of these subsidies. In fact, it is never reaching the small and marginal farmers directly. So it's a big question that is it actually serving the purpose? And moreover, the last line that this subsidy has been in practice for more than 3 decades. Now it's a high time we need to rethink about the implementation of subsidy, whether it should be there or it should be withdrawn. So it's a very important topic. It's a very important question. And please let me tell you that I'm going in the flow of the same topics as given in NCERT, only I have converted them into question and answer. Then comes is the next topic. We have just discussed about agriculture, agricultural scenario. We discussed that it was in a very bad shape, as the British had highly neglected the agriculture, industrial sector. So just after independence, the government of India, as I mentioned in the last slide, had thought of IPR, which was first introduced in the year 1948. But that IPR could not be that successful. Unfortunately, it was a big fail. Therefore, after the contribution of P.C. Mahalanobis, I repeat, that is why he's called the architect of the Planning Commission. After the intervention of P.C. Mahalanobis, the government of India could realize that we need to do a lot in industrial sector. So with implementation of second 5-year plan, which was started in the 1956, we started with the reformed IPR, which is commonly known as IPR 1956. What were the steps taken under IPR 1956? Children, I remind you again that this is again a very, very important question. It is generally asked for 3, 4, and 6 marks per web. Sorry. So the first step taken under IPR 1956 was classification of industries in 3 groups or categories. The first, group A, which was owned by the government only. That means they classified some of the industries which could be owned only by public sector. The second was they identified group B. Group B, it could only be owned and controlled by the private sector. That means there were numbered industries which could only go in the hand of private sector. Majority of the production units were in the hand of the government. And then comes is the third group, which is C group. It was free for both the sectors. That means they both could come together and could work together. That means in the contribution with the public as well as the private. The classification of this industry of large industries, of course, the second step they took was of reservation of SSI. Now my question is, what is SSI? SSI, that is small scale industries. The small scale industries are those industries which are very small in size. Their investment, their employment, and the production sizes are much smaller than the large scale industry. The government of India reserved some of the areas and some of the production units under SSI only. That means they could not be converted into large sector. Why did they do so? As I had mentioned that in 1950, Indian economy was in a very bad shape. It was not easy for Indian economy to recover its productivity, GDP, and employment. So they needed to work into chunks or to work into a decentralized manner. Therefore, they promoted SSI. Now, in detail, I'll tell you what were the reasons of promoting or reserving SSIs in India. So the first reason is employment. SSI is generally labor intensive. I repeat, SSI or small scale industry is generally labor intensive. They don't depend on big machines or huge industries. So when it comes to labor intensive technology, it means it will absorb majority of human resource in India. Then growth in GDP. See, when there is no productivity, there will be no growth in GDP. But when there is productivity, as we know, every drop is important for an ocean. In the same way, every SSI was important for the growth of the country. So the more will be the production, the more will be the growth in the GDP. Decentralization. These large scale industries were centralized to some of the Indian parts like Maharashtra, Gujarat, West Bengal. But what about the rest of India? They could not only depend on the agricultural sector, or their destiny could not just be left on the agriculture. So what we did is we started decentralizing the production unit, and there we encouraged those parts of India, may it be the rural India or may it be the backward states of India, where we promoted SSI by reservation. For example, Tata Iron and Steel Company, TISCO, which has been established in the northeastern part of India, which we know is Jharkhand. This particular part is very good in the production of steel, and therefore multiple dependent industries, of course small scale industries, have been set up over there. Now comes is low capital requirements. We know that Indians were poor, they did not have sufficient of capital. Therefore, they could easily manage with the SSI, that means small scale industries, which required small amount of investment. And of course, exploitation of resources. You have studied in geography in junior classes that India is very rich in resources, made with the minerals, made with the forest resource, and of course, the human resource. So to exploit these resources is very important, as you have studied in class 11th in PPC, that is production possibility curve, that can only be shifted with the maximum or optimum utilization of resources. So it was very important to utilize the resource, which could only be possible by SSI. Now, the third thing they did is SEZ, which is still very much prevalent. SEZ full form is Special Economic Zones. I repeat, Special Economic Zones. These are the zones which are declared by the government with multiple economic benefits and supports, like provision of tax holiday. Children, it can be an independent question as well. Therefore, please listen to it very carefully. SEZ, Special Economic Zone. It is allowed up with some tax holiday. That means under the production of SEZ or in the production of SEZ areas, the industries are not supposed to pay any kind of taxes till certain duration of time. Then they're also provided with world-class infrastructure. For example, connectivity, roads, railways, ports, and many more things. And then comes is the social securities. The social benefits, advantages, and securities are also provided to these SEZ areas. In Gujarat, you're living in Gujarat, Ahmedabad, you may be a part of Ahmedabad. So just adjacent to Ahmedabad, you will just be knowing the name of Sanand. Majority of portions in Sanand have also been declared as SEZ. Proceeding to, with the consideration that this has been clear to you and a very important topic, please go through this when studying. Proceeding to the trade, that means import and export. The major contribution of income of any economy comes from three factors. Of course, that is agriculture. Second, the third is export. In the objectives of 5-year plan, I talked about a term that is self-reliance. And I mentioned that India was not at all self-reliant, as they had been dependent on the imports. Exports were very, very limited and imports were very high, which gives birth to trade imbalances. I repeat, trade imbalance, which you have studied in macroeconomics. Now, to resolve this problem of trade imbalance, we made a policy which import substitution. I repeat, import substitution. This import substitution is also very commonly known as inward-looking trade strategy. I repeat, inward-looking trade strategy. So if you talked about import substitution or if you talked about the inward-looking trade strategy, they both are the same things. So there is nothing to worry about. What does it mean? It simply means, as you can see the first point over here, what does it mean? Import substitution means to make the country more independent by reducing the imports by the production of homemade goods. So why did we adopt this? First of all, as I have been mentioning, that we wanted to be self-reliant. We wanted to achieve trade balance. We wanted to achieve trade balance means we did not want the imports to be very high or on the higher side and export to be on the lower side. We actually wanted that import and export should be on a balanced side. Foreign exchange reserve. We know just to purchase the things like petroleum, crude oil, or the goods like right from needle to ship, whatever we import, we need to make payments in foreign exchange. You know, foreign exchange means any other currency other than the domestic currency. So every government, every economy maintains some reserve for it, which is known as foreign exchange reserve. You know, it should always be favorable. If it is not, the economy is in big trouble. As you can see, the stance of Sri Lanka. When long time back, Sri Lankan economy was declared as bankrupt economy, one of the reasons was they had lack of foreign exchange reserves. They were not having money to make the payments for petroleum they purchased from the rest of the country or the rest of the world. In fact, the same scenario is being repeated with Pakistan's economy. So to be very, very self-dependent was also one of the reasons. Then, of course, growth in GDP. When you encourage domestic production, there will be growth in GDP. And the last is technological advancements. See, becoming self-reliant is not just a thing going without any other support. It needs a lot of other supports. Like one of them is scientific and technological advancements. The more is the scientific and technological advancement, the more we will be the country known as to be self-reliant. Like today we can see that as developed we are, we can count on the domestic productions. So the substitution had all these reasons to be implemented. Now, how it worked? What was the framework or what was the policy framework? The first thing was high tariff. I'm sure that you're known to this word tariff. These means taxes, which are charged on imports and exports. So the government of India put very high tariff on imported. Of course, other than a few commodities, not all the commodities, some compulsory commodities were free from the tariff. That, giving an example, like electronic products, the goods and produces related to luxury were all put with high tariff, so that import was discouraged. Quota, it is also known as quantitative restriction. I repeat, children, quota is also known as quantitative restriction. So what does it mean? The government of India had fixed a quantity that you cannot import more than this into our country, just to avoid unnecessary import and unnecessary payment to the rest of the world. And the next and the last thing is license. You know, it was very important and it is still there. That if you want to import anything from abroad or want to export anything to abroad, you need license. What is license? License is a kind of permission. So you need to take permission from the government for importing anything as well as exporting. So it was just to make legal check on the import and exports of the goods. So this is how the import substitution started working. How were the impacts? Of course, there was some negative and positive. I'll first talk about the positive impacts. India to a very extent became self-sufficient as the consumer had no other option but to depend on the domestic producers, which encouraged the domestic producers. it encouraged, and hand in hand, it encouraged GDP growth. Negative things, as now there were no competitions. Listen to me very carefully. Now, the Indian producers did not have any competition. They were free. They were enjoying monopoly in Indian market. Secondly, the negative impact was on consumer. Consumer did not have any option. They did not have good options or cheap options to buy and consume the produces. Proceeding to the next topic, I won't go much in detail, but this is a very, very important topic, and believe every content over here is there and very much there in textbook. So you can one just textbook, you read the textbook, you'll find these points. But then it's an indirect question, so may trouble you. That is, discuss the impact of industrial and trade policies on Indian government. Indirect, if I say, that is the impact of IPR 1956 and import substitution on Indian economy. So there have been multiple impacts. The first is the industrial policy revolution as well as the import substitution impressively worked for the first 7 5-year plans. And as a result or as consequence, we could see that there was a growth in GDP. It contributed right from 13% to 24.6%, almost doubled. Now, there were growth in GDP of multiple industrial sector like jute, cotton, iron and steel, and many more things, as no longer the Indian industrial sector was restricted. Then comes is the promotion of small scale industry. It is actually a cherry on the cake. Small scale industry did wonders. The protection to the small scale industries helped in decentralized development and productivity of Indian economy. Now, what were the challenges which came after the industrial and trade policy? So there are multiple challenges, but CBSE has just talked about one challenge, which is license. For production and import, both we needed license, and this soon came as one of the correct measure of the government. And that is why the terms like bureaucracy, red tapeism, license Raj became very common. So what is this license Raj, and why did we call this license Raj so negatively? Actually, to start up with any industry or to start up with any import and export or trading business, we needed license. It actually became a lobby for corruption. Why? Because it was now only becoming the domain of the huge industries who could easily take the license from the government. But the rest of the small companies were not that easy and comfortable for availing the license from the government. So it discouraged multiple Indian producers and purchasers. In fact, it also discouraged multiple investors in India. So till the year 1991, this industrial license Raj system made huge damages to the growth of Indian industrial projects. Now, there are two bonus questions. The first is, this is very common in the question paper. Does modernization as planning object create contradiction? Generation? Explain. Generally, student write yes. On the basis of my experience, I say that most of you believe that yes, because it gives it allows implementation of machines, that is capital intensive technology. So it is enemy of employment. But actually the answer is it is not. Modernization is not an enemy of employment. Why? There are multiple reasons. First is it helps in the human capital formation. When human becomes more skilled, as good science, more skilled, work, better output. It also helps in employment generation. You see, when there is advancement, when there is modernization, there are so many demands, there are so many services which are demanded. And these demands give results to production, and production further gives birth to employment. It also helps the people to adapt new science and technological developments. So life becomes easy. And when it is all about, take an example, when we had ATMs, we gave job to the ATM guards. We also appointed, the banks also appointed multiple technicians for the maintenance of ATM machines. We appointed the security agencies for the transportation of money to ATM. So we cannot always say that advancement is enemy of employment. It also helps the economy to be competitive. See, if you do not allow modernization, you cannot compete with the rest of the world. And if you cannot compete with the rest of the world, forget about the employment. Then the last, that is about the role of SSI. Was it really justified? Yes, it is. It's a one marker, children. I'm highlighting. In 1955, we made a committee known as Carvey Committee. It's a one marker and a very, very important one marker. I repeat, in 1955, we made a committee which is known as Carvey Committee. It was in support of small scale industry. It said that it needs very less investment, which is only up to 5 lakhs. It is about the time. I'm talking about the 1950. Of course, present limit is not that low, but I'm talking about the period 1950. So last thing is, it is also labor intensive, as I had already mentioned. That's it for the day. I hope the session was useful to you, and we'll wait for you to see you in the next session, which is the day after tomorrow. Till the time, please revise these 2 chapters covered for IED. Thank you so much.